It's been a solid 30 seconds since I've talked about this, so we're gonna do it. I was confronted today with an opinion on Reddit that I have seen so many times before. I've been seeing this idea for literally years. But it came to mind today because Reddit be crazy like that. The idea that the issue with 4th edition is that everyone feels like a wizard. It's not that rogues and fighters feel wrong. They just feel the same as the wizard. And so, that's not right. Fighters and rogues and other martial type non-casters, if you will, should have basically just at-will abilities and a bunch of passives that bump those up. Okay. So there's two issues here. I want to talk about the smaller issue first. Smaller, perhaps a more core issue, but I think it's easier to describe. You can't really do that and expect it to turn out well. If one set of classes only has at-will abilities and another set of classes has resources to spend, that's the resource spendy classes are pretty much universally going to be better by a large margin. We have seen this time and again. 3rd edition, 5th edition, both did this. And they had similar results. So there's that. That idea does not work. It's also, by the way, sub issue. It's not realistic. As I have talked about before, where cooldowns and the expenditure of limited use abilities for martials actually makes more sense when you think about how actual combat works compared to having everything be on all the time. So there's those. But that's not really what I want to talk about today. Today I want to talk about the psychology of this statement, and I think I may have figured it out. Because you always hear someone say that, it makes fighters and rogues and rangers and everyone just feel like a wizard. I've never heard anyone say that it makes the wizard feel like a fighter. Why would that be? Why is it always that they feel like casters and never that the casters feel like martials? I propose that the idea is that the entire argument centers around the presumption that active abilities belong solely to spellcasters, and that all active abilities, i.e. powers, are inherently spell-like. Which is understandable because that's how old school D&D treated it. All active abilities were spells. If you could do something special a limited number of times, it was a spell. It's, I think, arguably more true in 5th edition than it was in 3rd. But, and while I have never played 2nd, I suspect it was true there. That's my sense, just based on stories and the general philosophy that I'm aware of with regards to that game's design. So old school D&D players are going to see any limited use active abilities as inherently spell-like, which means that classes that have those abilities, and kind of a lot of them, are going to feel like spellcasters. So this is a very limiting mindset, that you cannot give anyone limited use active abilities such as powers without making them like a spellcaster. So that's flawed from the get-go. It also is unique to D&D players. What I have found in my experience teaching 4th edition to a variety of groups is that there are 3 broad categories of players who will have opinions on this. One, old school D&D players. They played 3rd edition, they played 5th edition. 5th edition not necessarily being old school, but it is deeply inspired by old school design philosophies. So they carry forth that, it's kind of like generational trauma, to be honest. They carry forth those preconceptions. So if you basically only have experience with other editions of D&D, you would probably see this the way that this Reddit poster did. where active limited use abilities are spells. Therefore, everyone is very samey because they all use the same kind of power structure. But then there's people who are not old school D&D players. They're new to RPGs. Maybe they've played one or two other games of D&D. They don't have their roots down in any kind of old school gaming philosophies. Those players have never made that kind of statement to me. They've never said, like, oh, these two classes feel like they're going to be the same because of this. Like, they don't have that preconception in their mind to make that kind of connection. And the other ones are people with a much broader experience in the tabletop gaming community, or tabletop gaming experiences. That is with board games, card games, and RPGs. Just a general broad experience with tabletop game mechanics. They also, I think, typically do not approach the game with this. Unless they are basically like the greater degree of experience with older style D&D, the more likely you are to make this kind of assertion. And I think is telling for me. And I understand that this is fully anecdotal. Like, I'm the one telling you what these people say and the kinds of feedback that I get about the game from my own experiences with teaching it to people. So purely anecdotal, I would not submit this as any kind of necessarily representative of the broader population, but this is how my view of the topic is formed. I see people making this argument only if they are primarily coming to 4th edition from other versions of D&D. 3rd, 5th, maybe older. I don't have much experience with someone who's only played older editions or primarily plays older editions, because I think most of the people that I associate with recognize that 2nd edition is crazy pants. So I think the fact that this only comes from that particular demographic is telling that it is more an issue with the way that other versions of D&D approach game design and abilities for characters, and less an issue with 4th edition itself. And that 4th edition is actually probably more in line, in fact, not even probably, it's definitely more in line with modern game design conventions, which is that everyone can have nice things. Whereas D&D has historically only given nice things to casters. Because it's easy to imagine a spell that does it, whatever it is in this particular case. You need to bypass whatever obstacle. Imagine a spell that does it. It's very easy to do. It's incredibly easy. It is somewhat more difficult. It requires more creative juices. Perhaps more thought, more diligence, and a greater awareness of the mechanics of your own game to design other kinds of abilities and to create these consistent structures for non-caster classes to be able to address the same kinds, the same scope of problems that a caster can. That's a much more modern kind of thing that everyone should be treated equally. It's not super modern, because I think 4th edition was definitely D&D playing catch up in that regard. Other RPGs were definitely doing that kind of stuff first. But yeah, that's just me. That's what I've been doing on Reddit lately. Looking at old arguments that I've been seeing since the late 2000s. And just pondering, because yes, I've been seeing these arguments for a very long time, and I've been arguing against them for just as long, but I'm finding that now in this decade I have more context for where they might be coming from, and I think I'm able to approach them from directions that I probably would never have thought of to do before. specifically because my own experiences are much more broad at this stage, both in terms of like having taught other people and my own experiences with playing other games. So, yeah, it's a wrong argument. It's not a ridiculous argument. I've definitely heard wilder arguments, but I think it is a very wrong argument, and it is telling about the mindset of the person making it.